Welcome to the Kidsburgh Kidcast. I'm Christine Sorensen, your host and mom of three. Today we're talking about concussions in children, dispelling some myths with a local concussion expert because our children's brains are the most important tool to discover their superpowers. New guidelines just came out from the CDC. Nearly 1 million children in the U.S. will go to the emergency room for a possible concussion. Now, the new guidelines provide researched guidance for physicians, coaches, and parents. One of the biggest recommendations is to never allow a child believed to have experienced a concussion to return to the playing field the same day. The study suggests that history and exam, not brain imaging or blood tests, are the best way to diagnose a concussion. The CDC also favors renaming concussions a mild traumatic brain injury to emphasize the serious nature of the event. Now let's get to our expert. With fall sports in full throttle right now, we want to talk about how to keep our kids' brains healthy so they can use those superpowers for a lifetime. Here to talk about dispelling some concussion myths is Dr. Nate Kegel of UPMC. Thank you for joining us.
Sure, Christine.
Yeah, there's some confusion sometimes around concussions, so let's dispel these myths, starting with number one, the myth that all concussions, treatments, and recoveries are alike.
So what we see in our clinic is that there's several different unique features with a concussion, and they can present by themselves and they can present along with each other. So we see people have significant headache issues or vestibular problem, which means you have dizziness or balance issues. Eye issues can happen with concussion. So these specific problems can happen with different types of concussions. They can exist by themselves or they can happen with each other. And those types of concussion that we've identified can guide the treatment that we're going to initiate, different types of therapy that we can do. Most people think that concussion, you just rest and you let it recover, but if we initiate some active treatment, I think that really helps a lot, speeds things up.
Yeah, I didn't know that. All right, myth number two, that everyone is at the same risk for concussion.
So it definitely varies based on some of your pre-existing factors. People with migraine or headache history seem to be a little bit higher risk. People with a history of car sickness or eye issues. The things that might be affected by a concussion, if you come to the table with some of those weaknesses initially, I think it makes you a little more vulnerable. Those are risk factors that we like to be sure that we identify.
Okay. Now, another myth that a concussion occurs only as a direct blow to the head that results in a loss of consciousness.
Sure. Concussion happens when there's enough force to your head to cause your brain to move inside your skull. So an example I use is a car accident. If you get rear-ended, your head's going to jolt forward and backwards and not necessarily hit anything, but you can still get a concussion and have concussion symptoms from that. And most cases do not involve loss of consciousness. I believe maybe only 10 to 15% of cases that we see have loss of consciousness with them.
All right, another myth that it's safe for a player to return to the same game or practice after suffering concussion-related symptoms.
So any player who exhibits concussion symptoms during that game should be removed and should not return. And that's the protocol that professional sports even follow. But for kids who participate in youth sports, it's definitely important for them to be taken out if there's any concussion symptoms following a blow to the head.
Good advice. Okay, and the last one, having one concussion places you at increased risk for future concussions. That's not true.
It's not true. What we see is that certain people are more prone based on some of those risk factors that I mentioned before. So you can't make a blanket statement and say that everybody who's had one concussion is more likely to get another one. I think it's more of an individual case-by-case situation with that.
Dr. Kegel, thank you for the great information and advice. For more on this topic, go to KDKA.com/Kidsburgh.